Hey guys, Bidu here to tell you about the latest from Ensiferum, Winterstorm, on October 18th on Metal Blade Records. The album has 10 tracks, 43 minutes in length, and this is the band's 9th full-length studio album. They are a Finnish folk melodic death metal band. This is a concept album, and the design of this record is connected to that concept. The two are intertwined. So the design of the album is there to give you a sense of path, to put the journey forward and allow you to be embraced by it from the opening intro all the way to the last song. It's a record that moves really well from track to track. You always feel like there aren't really pauses or breaks in this album. There might be some moments where the album slows down, but that's more delivered from a musical standpoint or even from a vocal approach. But overall, the way the record is built, the way the songs are put together, it's all about laying out what the path is going to be, what the journey is going to be, and then let the listener become fully engulfed in it. And that's exactly what this record is. From a sound standpoint, because of that concept, or maybe because of that concept, this album has a more epic, theatrical, cinematic sound. But it's also a lot darker than previous Ensiferum records. When it comes to that more theatrical sound, to that more orchestrational driven approach, that obviously thins out the experience, but it makes the record a lot bigger, a lot larger. And for this concept, it felt to me like the sound was the main catalyst of everything else that was happening. Everything else is there to define what the story is and to define the journey, but the way you can almost see it is through the soundtrack that they've created, because this album really feels like a theatrical soundtrack in terms of the size, the impact of the orchestrational work from the first to the last song, and obviously also an album that doesn't depend only on melodic hooky riffs and on guitar-driven melodies to succeed. It's an album that still uses the guitar sound, the melodies, the riffs, the hooks extremely well throughout the entire record, but I didn't feel like this is a guitar-driven album. The guitars are there to complement the sound, or I should say to be part of the sound, but not to be the drivers of the sound. It's too much of a larger sounding record to have just one element drive it. This record is driven by the combination of all of them. Keys, orchestrations, bass, guitars, and drums. Everything is there to be a piece of this large puzzle, and then that allows the record to have a big sounding presence, but not to be a record that loses the elements within it. You could still see the impact from the drums, you can still see the impact from the guitars, from the bass within the soundscape. The production behind the album allows all of these elements to come alive and have their own room to breathe within the songs. But the size kind of takes over, and the impact that the overall record has from a soundscape point of view becomes a lot more defining in the record than the individual pieces that make it. And that to me is a completely different approach, a departure, if you will, from Thalassic, for example, which was an album that had a little bit more focus on the guitar sound, that was a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more narrow, if you will. But being a little bit more narrow and less epic allows the songs to be hookier and catchier. This album doesn't have as many hooks. It's not an album that has a lot of earworm style tracks, but it's worth for its whole. It's about the story, it's about the concept, it's about creating a theatrical approach to the music that allows that story to come to life. And like I said, it's also a darker sounding album. There's a dark veil associated with this record, which doesn't give you as many moments of being jovial, of being upbeat, of being fun, of having party essence in it. So there's a lot of elements that have always been kind of part of the DNA of Ensiferum that are missing on this record. And then there's elements on this record that we hadn't perhaps seen to this level on previous albums. So it's a very defining record. It's a record that offers a different side of the band sound-wise, even vocally to a certain extent, but it's an album that offers a different side of the band while still keeping some of the main cores alive and well. But it definitely comes across as a different record. It feels like a different record. It feels like a unique record from Ensiferum's standpoint, and I think that's going to perhaps create a sense of being very divisive. I don't think this is going to be an album that people are going to be indifferent to it. Either people are gonna absolutely love the record because of how epic and triumphant and fantasy it is. It's a really fantasy-driven album, if you will. And some people are not going to enjoy it because it doesn't have that more party side, or it doesn't have that more fun side, those more individual hooks on individual songs. This album is more about the collective, a lot less about the individualities. Now, when it comes to the vocals, you're obviously going to get Petri and Pekka to trade blows, if you will. They alternate styles, their own individual styles and approaches, and it's pretty mixed up throughout the record. It's not like you're going to have more of one, less of the other. Normally you're going to get more of Petri in the verses and more of Pekka in the chorus. That's kind of the dynamic that we start to see with Thalassic, and now we're starting to see it a little bit better defined with this album. I think having both of them allows you to do two things. It allows you to create an album that has that epic essence to it, because when you have clean vocals that can soar, almost power metal style vocals, you're able to do a lot more. You're able to create a fantasy world. You're able to create a cinematic experience. And then when you have Petri's harsh vocals, his style of vocals adds some heaviness to the album. It adds some darkness to the album, but I felt like the heaviness that it adds really helps this record, because sound-wise, it's not a very heavy sounding album. It has big sound, but it's not a heavy sounding album. So having his heavier side of his vocal range there really helps give some thickness to the volume that already exists. And then you have Madeleine from Elaine singing Scars in My Heart. She is the only singer on that song, a song that breaks the record, a ballad, if you will, that was really interesting, that they went with a full song with a guest vocalist. But in the concept of the album, it works. In the individual nature of the song, I was surprised, but it still works. So it's a song that also has an interesting aspect to it, and I'll speak more about it because it's definitely one of my top 3 songs on this record. So it's an album that vocally, as you can tell, there are a lot of things for the listener to digest. There are a lot of things for the listener to take in. So overall, an epic sounding record, and I appreciate that. I was not as much of a fan of the darkness that came with it, because the darkness with that size really felt at times like I was engulfed by the record. And when I was engulfed by the record, I not necessarily had the ability to digest it and to really appreciate it, because I just felt overwhelmed by the size of it. So it's a record that works better if you listen to it from beginning to end. It definitely has more life, it definitely has more energy, and some of the issues within certain songs that I didn't appreciate become minuscule, like almost don't matter in the overall idea of the record and how the record is delivered. But it's definitely an album that it's going to be very divisive. Like I said, it's going to be an album that's going to put people on one side of the fence or on the other. I appreciate the concept, I appreciate the delivery. I think it's a unique record within their discography, within a very deep discography, and it's an album that has its own uniquenesses. That's why it has this different feel, this different approach, this different delivery. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Fatherland. Galloping sounding track, super epic sounding song, massive song. Musically, it has this big presence to it. There is some heaviness in the guitars, but also some melody that really drives the guitars. The main riff on this song is very hooky, very catchy. One of the songs on this record that you can really pinpoint a specific sound, a specific melody, a specific riff as being focal to how the whole song develops and to how the whole song comes forward. The alternating vocals between the two main vocalists really help create some movement in this song, some more lateral movement, because forward movement the song has a ton. So it's a very dynamic, very engaging track, both musically and vocally. Having a choir adds to the size, so now you're using vocals to add to the size that the sound is already giving, and the orchestrations on this track really emphasize the overall design and the overall cinematic or theatrical feel that this track puts forward. The choir doesn't hurt either. Next we have Scars in My Heart. So Madeleine from Elaine sings on this track. She's the only singer on this track. I was really surprised by it. but it works well. Her voice combines with this song extremely well. And I felt like it combined with this song because they created almost a Victorian sounding track. It has a Victorian ballad aroma to it. And I don't know if you could put male vocals on a track like this and make it work. It doesn't have that essence. So either you would go fully instrumental and then you have to rearrange the song. Some of the arrangements would have not worked if it's a full instrumental track. Or you go with a female vocalist. So going with Madeleine made sense to me because she added to the concept, but then she added incredible quality to this Victorian ballad that's absolutely beautiful. It's haunting, it's epic, and it has this haunting presence, not just in the sound, not just in that Victorian feel that the track offers, that Victorian melody, that Victorian vibe, but it's also haunting from a vocal delivery standpoint. Last but definitely not least, my favorite track on the album, The Howl. A more traditional, if you will, Ensiferum song in an album that has a lot of non-traditional Ensiferum songs. I like this track because it has that tavern vibe to it. It just has that feel of a fun song and a track that feels like it has some room to breathe, that feels a little bit light. Pekka's vocals in the chorus are outstanding. I think this is one of his best vocal songs on this entire record. I thought he completely catched the vibe of the track, the mood of the song, and then he delivered that in his own vocal performance. Petrie's vocals add some darkness to the way the verses come together, to the way the verses are delivered, and I thought that was an important aspect in order to then elevate Pekka's vocals in the chorus. You cannot have one without the other. The two become the yin and the yang that pull each other apart, emphasizing the uniquenesses of each one of them. Definitely my favorite song, maybe because of more that traditional, straightforward, folky, melodic Ensiferum sound. Because of that, I think that's why this becomes easily my favorite song on the entire record. This is it, Ensiferum Winter Storm on October 18th on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.